Hello, so my name is Skip Olson. I'm the Global Head of Integrated Evidence Strategy and Innovation at Novartis. And today I'd like to explore with you the world of implementation science. So I have the usual Novartis disclaimer. These slides are presenting my view, not necessarily that of Novartis. And I'll begin by asking a question, sort of, have you ever had amazing results from a phase 3 trial and thought, this drug will sell itself? And then you discover that, well, despite these wonderful results, the innovation is simply not reaching patients the way you thought it would. Yeah, okay, so come on, admit it. This happened, unfortunately, all the time. So let's look at an example. What do I mean by this? Okay, we have great results and it's not selling. There's a problem, there's a barrier, something's happening. So we'll look at an example. This one is from the beginning of the pandemic. It already seemed like a long time ago. It was only 2 years though. Anyway, efficacy issues are important, but let's look at the COVID-19 vaccines. Okay, so we remember they were developed with historic speed and efficiency, but we still had some logistical issues that didn't really keep pace for the development of the vaccines themselves. So you might remember that the Pfizer-BioNTech vaccine was the first to cross the finish line, the first one to come out, and everyone hailed it as a breakthrough, and it was. But there was this issue of ultra-cold storage requirements that made this distribution complex. Later, they came out with data that showed that the undiluted vaccine could actually be stored for up to 2 weeks at standard freezer temperature. Now, that made things much easier. This whole logistical problem was then, I won't say solved, but it was reduced, lessened, made it much easier. So the question is, what would have happened if the new stability data had been delivered alongside the clinical trial results? Would we have had immediate deployment to residential care facilities? Maybe. Would we have high priority vaccination sites in community settings? Maybe. But these are the kinds of things that are hurdles that could then be overcome if we had actually dealt with the logistical issues at the same time as we were developing or dealing with efficacy issues. So in conclusion here, efficacy and safety are important, but there are these barriers that often get in the way of innovation being implemented properly into the healthcare system. Now, there were probably lots of reasons why this couldn't have been done at the same time. Like I said, this was developed with historic speed. So it's not a criticism, but it's sort of a question to raise, am I working currently on something where there might be these kinds of barriers coming up? Maybe I should look into them now. Okay. And this is not related just to medicine. There was a product many, many years ago, 10 years ago now, Google Glass. So it was launched in 2012. It was these, obviously looked like eyeglasses, head-mounted display with smartphone capabilities. It was one of the most hyped technologies of the time. But the designers didn't clearly define or validate, well, what's the user's problems? What solutions would Google Glass actually provide to the users? How would the customers use the glasses? And these things weren't really figured out, addressed, thought through. You can see where I'm going with this. Has anyone actually heard of Google Glass? No, probably not. So Google discontinued the product's development in 2015. So this revolutionary product, and the technology was wonderful, but this revolutionary product never succeeded because users couldn't figure out why they needed it in their lives. Well, this is an implementation issue. So we saw one kind of implementation issue. We have another one here. We think, well, what is this all about? And what can I do about it? Okay, so enter implementation research, implementation science. What is it? What's the purpose? Okay, so the purpose of this is to introduce potential new solutions and innovations into a healthcare system. This is what we're doing. It's to enable faster and broader access to that innovation and support large-scale use and sustainability. Well, these are all things that we want to do. Of course, we want our new solutions to actually be used. We want fast and broad access, and we want it all to be sustainable. So what is it about implementation research? Okay, we'll look a little further. The situation that we have now has been nicely called the Valley of Death. So a little bit dramatic, but it points out a very particular problem that we have. This Valley of Death, it refers to this gap between healthcare research and clinical practice. Okay, why? Well, this results from lots and lots of research that's never translated into a real world setting. So that research that's being done, if you like, never sees the light of day or is not properly understood or used. So we might as well not have done it in the first place. So some statistics, to kind of put some numbers behind this, it's estimated that between 30 and 40% of patients don't receive treatment of proven efficacy. Well, if we have products of proven efficacy, why aren't patients using them? Flip side, 20 to 25% of patients receive unnecessary or potentially harmful treatments. Well, how can that happen? If everyone understood what these products are all about and who to give them to, we shouldn't be seeing this. Again, hints towards, well, we're not really implementing things properly. Another little fact, as little as 14% of published evidence is actually translated into clinical practice, with a mean waiting time between innovation and application of 17 years. So even if it is implemented into clinical practice, it takes a very long time. So this implementation deficit really contributes to this excess research waste. So what we have here in red, we do lots and lots of research. There's this valley of death because a lot of that research is not making its way into clinical practice. So what we see here is well-conducted, well-reported studies still need translating. And this is a nice little diagram of the leaky research pipeline. And it's even been classified into two types of research waste. There's the research waste one, which is basically poor research, never has some design issues, or is never fully published, or it's unusable. And then we have this research waste two, where you do lots of things, but it's never really understood, or people don't know exactly, well, it sounds good, but what does it mean for me? How do I use this information? And this is as little as 14% of evidence is implemented. People don't know how to. And the question about sustainability. So all of this is what we're going to tackle with implementation science, to really look into how do we translate from the research world into the real world setting. So here we have an actual definition, implementation science. What is it anyway? So here's a definition. So it's the scientific study of methods to promote the systematic uptake of research findings and other evidence-based principles into routine practice, and hence to improve the quality and effectiveness of health services and care. So the last part here, to improve the quality and effectiveness of health services and care, that's why we're in the pharmaceutical industry. This is what we're trying to do. It takes more than just a study of efficacy and safety. We need to take these things up into clinical practice. So that's what we're going to be talking about when we take a little bit further about implementation science. So this research, it's really into questions concerning the implementation. So it's not a question about efficacy, it's a question about implementation. We're translating the findings. We're really going between clinical trials where we look into and demonstrate what should be done, and the use in the healthcare systems. This is showing what's being done in routine clinical practice. So we're going from what we know, clinical trials, to what we're doing, and this is the real world clinical practice. But there is this gap, and this is what implementation research is all about, to bridge this gap. So the principles, a few very easy principles. Everything, it should be centered around the real world, so real clinical practice settings. Rather than trying to control these conditions or remove their influence, we want to know the real barriers. What are the real issues? Why are the results being, stopped from being used in clinical practice? So we want to focus on the real world. We want to focus on unselected subjects. So we really want to focus on the population who's going to receive the innovation with as few restrictions as possible. So think pragmatic trial, pragmatic setting. The context is critically important. So, implementation research really works within the context of everyday life. The social part of it, the cultural part, political, legal, physical, and in real healthcare settings. This is localized. This is not one size fits all across the globe. This is perhaps country by country, healthcare system by healthcare system. Context is important. It has to be done for and with decision makers. So we need to focus on the end user and not just produce data. And this means co-created, co-produced. We have to do this with the decision makers so that they understand what's coming out at the end and they agree this is what they need as well. So those are some of the principles of implementation research. So now let's take a look at the measures of implementation outcomes. They're a little bit different than what we're used to seeing. We're used to seeing efficacy and safety. So the first one we have here, acceptability. So everyone knows more or less what acceptability is, but what is this really as an outcome for implementation? So if we look at the definition, we see it's the measure of an intervention being accepted by both the deliverers, so the healthcare professionals, and the recipients, i.e. the patients. Do they accept this? Do they like it? Will they use this? Oftentimes we don't measure this. It's not that we don't care, but we don't think that this is something we actually need to measure. Because if they don't accept it, if they don't like it, they're not going to use it. The adoption. Well, what do we mean by adoption? Well, this is the speed or the rate of the intervention uptake. Do they adopt it quickly? Are there issues? Is it appropriate? So this is the perceived fit of an innovation or intervention for a given setting, population, problem. Is it really the right solution for this patient population? The feasibility, the fidelity and fit. Now, the next one, implementation cost, we're used to think about cost, coverage, and sustainability. So these are all measures of outcomes to see whether or not we've successfully implemented an intervention into the healthcare system. So some different definitions, things that we can work with though. These are things that we also need to take into account if we want a successful innovation to actually be used in clinical practice. So we can think about a very simplified framework to be co-created at each stage. So this is the sort of the 3Ds: discovery, design the solution, deliver in the healthcare system. So discovery, design, deliver. So in the first stage, this discovery phase, so what are we doing? And we're looking at and discovering the root causes. What are the root causes of these implementation problems that hinder us from actually having access to these interventions? It addresses the problems, the barriers, the needs, etc. Then in stage 2, we say, okay, now we know what the root causes are. We know not just the barrier, but the root cause behind it. In the design phase, we say, okay, we're going to address some of these issues, maybe not all of them. We're going to address some of these issues to find out, okay, can we do something about them? We're going to design a solution, and we're going to test it to see, well, does the solution actually help? Maybe it doesn't. Then we're going to take that hopefully successful test of our solution. And in stage 3, we're going to incorporate this into the healthcare system to achieve these sustained health impacts. This is what we're looking for. Discovery, design, deliver. So I've reached this stage where a lot of people will still be wondering, yeah, okay, this is maybe a little bit high level, a little bit theoretical, not tangible enough. What do we really mean? Okay, so here's the sort of the secret behind all of this, an example. Everyone loves examples. Here's one. The value of death in pharma. So what happens? It's a migraine example. The numbers are fictitious, but you can imagine this could be real. So the first part, we say, okay, the drug cures migraines in 98% of patients with a specific subtype. Okay, This is where we get all excited and we think, oh my God, we have such wonderful results, 98% cure rate. The results will speak for themselves. We see at the next stage, where the results won't speak for themselves, and we have issues, and we have lots of issues. The first issue, 60% of the patients with this suspected subtype have access to a clinic with the ability to confirm the diagnosis. So right away, 40% of patients don't have access to a clinic, so they'll never get the right diagnosis. So they will never receive this particular innovation. 40% gone. We go to the next step. 50% of those clinics that can perform the test actually perform the test. Well, why? Why aren't they doing the test? They can do it, but they're not. Why not? Then go to the next level. Only 50% of patients diagnosed with that subtype actually receive treatment. Well, why not? We have a 98% cure rate. Is this all because of a lack of education? Does someone not understand something along the line? Or is it something else? What else? Okay, these are the kinds of questions that we need to be digging into in the discovery part, so that we can then begin to develop or design a potential solution to these barriers, so that then we can introduce it into the healthcare system. If we continue, we see 70% of patients are non-adherent to therapy. That's a huge non-adherence rate. Can we do anything about it? Why are patients non-adherent to therapy? Is it simply an educational issue, or is there something else behind it? So again, we have to go into the root causes and figure out, what is it? Just throwing more information and more education at a patient or a healthcare professional is not always the right solution. So we started with 98% of patients with this specific subtype could be cured of migraine, because of one barrier after the next. You see that in the end, only 4.5% of patients with that subtype are actually cured of their migraines. Okay, now I would say this is a valley of death here. We started out with, we should be reaching something like the 98%. We're only reaching 4.5, and we have implementation issue after implementation issue after implementation issue. We're ending up with 4.5%. So this is what implementation science is designed to address, any one of a number of these potential issues or others that you might come across in your particular disease area. So what could this look like in pharma? I mean, what implementation, there were lots of wordings, that go around. So the implementation of practice, so through a solution, might be, okay, the healthcare system is adopting this new migraine treatment, okay. The team in the healthcare system, they received this policy document, online education, automatic reminders, and coaching as part of the rollout. So that's the practice that might have come out through the discover, the design, deliver steps. The science behind it, implementation science, is, okay, the healthcare system is rolling out this new migraine treatment, and it's assessing the barriers to the treatment uptake so that it can determine which change strategies need to be put in place to ensure the treatment is utilized. So here we're really assessing, well, what are the barriers? How can we design change strategies to make sure it's successfully used in the system. So that's the science behind it. Hopefully they will deliver the implementation practice up above that will then be successful. And just another reminder that implementation science is centered around co-creation. So what happens if we push innovation? Well, we can try pushing innovation to patients, healthcare systems, healthcare professionals, but without proper implementation, we end up like Google Glass. So we don't want that. What we want really is co-creation. We need to work together to discover, design, and deliver, because implementation into the healthcare system is as important as efficacy and safety. So I thank everyone very much for having attended this session on implementation science. I hope you enjoyed it. Thank you.